All right, guys, we're just about to start the new SAT broadcast, so tune in if you'd like to find out more about the new SAT and the ACT and all the current formats of standardized tests. Thanks much. All right, if you guys would like to come in, we're starting right now. Guys, I want to welcome you to the PJ Test Prep presentation on the new SAT format, as well as the old format, the current one, as well as the ACT. I am PJ. I am founder of PJ Test Prep, and first I'm going to start you guys off with an SAT problem. This is the famous donut problem that you guys may have heard of. It was on the current format of the SAT a couple years ago, and it's a great example of the whole theme of today's lesson, which is the more you know about how these tests actually work, the easier it is to do better on them. So this question was pretty straightforward. It said we've got this donut shape, or I guess a washer because it's two-dimensional. The middle is hollow here. The inside, or the rest of it here, is a solid piece, and you're going to draw two straight lines on this in order to try to make the most distinct sectors out of this as you can. The answers are, can I make 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 pieces? What is the most number of distinct sectors I can create with two straight lines? First thing you should know about this, and the first thing you should know about the current format of the SAT at least, also the new format, questions on the math section go easy to hard. Some of you may have heard of that. Some of you may have noticed that if you took the SAT this morning and your scores were in front of you, you see a lot of right answers at the beginning and a lot of train wrecks at the end. What this means, if this is problem 19 out of 20, how hard is this problem going to be? This is going to be a pretty tricky one. So if we were to just start experimenting with this and say, oh, let me do the old, bullseye on it, that seems like a pretty logical solution. Well, right away, we already get 4 pieces of our graph. So we know right away the answer is not A or B. Elimination is key on all these tests. We also might suspect, okay, maybe C is the answer, but based on what I just told you guys, do you think 4 is the answer to this question? Why not? It's too easy. Now, if this was question number 1, 4 would be the answer. It really would be that easy. So don't overthink it on question number 1 or number 2. They really are pretty simple. I kind of doubt that this is the answer. Maybe I can't say for certain. I'm definitely not going to pick A or B. Another golden rule of the SAT in its current format is if you can eliminate one, you should always guess. Anybody know what the rule is for the ACT? In terms of when you should guess? Always. Why? There's no guessing penalty on that test. Very good. And there's not going to be a guessing penalty on the new format of the SAT as well. So once March 16 rolls around, go ahead and guess to your heart's content. Doesn't actually mean you need to do every question, but I'll get back to that. Now, I'm stuck between these two. I'm not sure which one I should pick, but I definitely am going to guess one of them. And even if I fuss around with this for 45 seconds and I just can't figure out how to get any more pieces, I still could probably take a pretty good guess and get this one right. If you know that the SAT loves to trick people, and it asks you what the most distinct pieces is, which of these is more likely to be the trap wrong answer? Yeah, maybe the higher one, maybe 6. And again, I'm not sure, but it just seems that would be maybe more likely to be the one they're trying to trick people into picking. So I would go with D, even if I wasn't sure about this. And even if I never did figure out that if I cut the shape like this, I can get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to do the problem because you just got it right anyway. There's such a thing as a good enough answer on all these test formats where if you just know how the tests work, you can do a lot better even if you're not actually better at the test. Test prep is something that you guys can learn. The main thing to remember about these tests is that they are by definition standardized. What standardized means is that it has to be the same every single time. They have to have a way of comparing the ACT that some kids took back in June with the ACT that many of you guys will be taking in September or October. It's not going to be the exact same numbers and same words, but it has to be the same level of difficulty with the same types of questions. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair if you got to take an easy test and they had to take a hard one. Anything that is repeatable, like playing the same board of a video game over and over again, you have to be able to get better at it. If you even practice, you'll get better. And if you have somebody who helped design the game, showing you all the secret one-ups are and the secret ways to kill all the bad guys, it's a lot easier of a process. But we're not here to talk about us and what we do. We're here to talk about you guys and these tests and what do your scores mean. I have a quick presentation for you about the new SAT, which I know many of you are eager to learn about and when that's going to be happening and what it means. Then we're going to talk about which tests you should take. how do I improve, most importantly, and we'll end with where to go from here and some question and answers at the end. So why are you taking these tests in the first place? Why do colleges make you do this? As you guys know, there are several things that colleges consider when they're deciding whether or not to admit you. Everybody knows about grades. This has always been and continues to be a really important part of what colleges decide whether they're going to let you in or not. Some argue it may be the most important thing. Others think it's kind of a combination of many of them, but obviously if you have a 4.9, that's going to be better than having a 2.9 with having taken as many AP classes as you can. They also care about your activities. Colleges don't just want butts and chairs. They want kids who are actually going to go out into the community and do something. More and more than ever in the world today, success isn't just following a track. It's showing that you can go out there and be resourceful and innovative and do things that not everybody else is doing. So if you've begun doing some of those things now, show them that on your application. They also care about who you are. This actually is the one that's made a big surge in recent years. They've always cared about who you are, of course, but things like your personal recommendations and probably most of all your college application essay. Anybody here an incoming senior? Just so I know who we're working with. Okay, a couple of you guys. That's something you guys want to be working on over the summer and the fall. Since kids in this digital age can apply to 15 schools super duper easily now, colleges want to make sure that they're getting kids who are a good fit, who might actually go to the school if they accept them. So that obviously factors in as well. And finally, SAT and ACT. Now people ask, why do we have to even do these stupid tests if they already know my grades? Well, unfortunately, as you guys probably know, grades aren't perfect. We all know somebody who has a 4.9 GPA, but only because they kind of just eased their way through, maybe bribed the teacher a little bit. Actually, they're not even really that clever, but why do they have a higher GPA than me? That's not fair. Also, on the other hand, there are people, and maybe you're one of them, who are perfectly bright, very intelligent people, but maybe you had a tough time sophomore year. You missed a couple grades in a couple classes. You had a teacher who just didn't like you or something, or you got placed in a class that wasn't a good fit for one reason or another. Grades can be flawed too. They're a good way of measuring, but it's helpful if they have something else. In some cases, they kind of think of the SAT and ACT as a tiebreaker. If Harvard is looking at 6,000 kids who all have 4.0s, how do they decide which ones? Well, if somebody got a 35 on their ACT and somebody else got a 15, that might be an indicator of something going on. Some people aren't those who just strive to have good grades. They're about other things. They're busy with their extracurriculars. Maybe their grades have slipped. Are your grades not as good as they really should be? Here's a chance to make it up. Prove to them that, no, I really am sharp. I really should be able to go to your super selective school. Here's my test score to prove it. If you don't prove it here and you don't prove it here, you gotta prove it somewhere. So it's sort of another chance for you guys. Now, what do these scores mean? You guys are now looking at the scores in front of you, all of you who have done the SAT or the ACT this morning. Just a quick reference, I won't go into too much detail because I think you guys know what these scores mean, but on the SAT current format, an average score is about a 1,500, 500 in each area. On the ACT, it's about a 21, and they average that score out. So if you are around that area, hey, you're right in the middle of the pack, that's great. If you're looking at some really selective colleges, obviously you probably want to be a bit above that, like a 26, 27, or a 1,800 or 1,900. Those are considered pretty high scores. Most people can't get scores that high, and so that starts to put you in the running for the most selective schools. If you're looking at, trying to go to Yale or something like that, if you could get north of 29, that would be ideal on the ACT, or higher than maybe 2,000 on the SAT. But there are tons of colleges you can go to, even if you got a 15 here on your ACT today. I think NCAA minimum requirement is 17, so if you want to play sports, you got to get at least that. But a good score on these tests all depends on what are you trying to do with it. If you're just trying to get into some school anywhere, the score you got in front of you right now is probably sufficient if your grades are decent. But if you really, really are trying to get into UCSB and you have a 3.0, 22 is probably not going to cut it on the ACT. You probably need to do a little higher than that. So take a look at those. If you have any questions about your individual scores, I'm happy to answer those afterwards. Want to get into the different formats of the test, and the one a lot of you guys are here to hear about today is the new SAT. So I have a couple of words and a PowerPoint with bears in it about this new test, since that's what everybody has been talking about. The new SAT is supposed to be the little bear of the test bear family. There are still two other formats that you guys can take up until March 2016, when the new format becomes the only format of the SAT that you can take. A couple of words about these new formats. Step one, relax. I know this new test sounds really scary and horrifying and it sounds super hard, but when has the SAT not been scary and confusing and hard? It's not like suddenly there's a test you have to take that scares you. There's always been a test that you had to take to scare you. This is just a slightly different format. And if it comforts you at all, it's a lot more like the current format of the ACT. So the ACT tends to be a slightly less scary mama bear of a test. The ACT is approaching that a little bit, so maybe it's less scary than before. It's still the same old thing. They're not testing anything new really here. It's still reading. They're still testing you on writing. They're still testing you on arithmetic, the 3 R's. There are a slightly different balance of those different things on the test now, but you're still going to get tested on the same concepts as before. You guys are ahead of the curve. You, by being in this presentations, will sort of know stuff that a lot of people don't. You also have help. I'm here as a resource for you guys. There's online resources rolling out. Please contact me if you ever have any questions about any of this stuff. And there may be a cool opportunity here that we'll get into in just a second. Now, to help you guys understand this a little bit more about the changes, I do want to talk about a few things that are changing on the SAT for those of you who've gotten familiar with the old format and want to know what's going to be new. Number 1, there is no more guessing penalty. I mentioned this. So those who hate these tricky test format of the old SAT, this is really good news. You don't have to worry about when I should guess. You should always guess. Now, big strategic tip I'll give you guys later, you don't necessarily actually still have to do every question. A good tip I always give kids on the reading section of, or excuse me, the math section of the ACT is the same tip I give people on the SAT in both of its formats. Imagine the ACT's math section is like a banquet table covered in 60 different sized cakes. Over here we have itty bitty little cupcakes, then they get a little bit bigger, and somewhere in the back and maybe one in the front there's a big 10-layer wedding cake and a 15-pound bundt cake that tastes like mayonnaise. I'm gonna pay you $10 for every cake that you can eat in an hour for the ACT. Where are you gonna start? Yeah, eat the cupcakes. Gobble those little cupcakes. They're worth just as much as the big ones are. Now, on the current format of the SAT, the little cakes are all in the front of the section. On the new format of the SAT, the little cakes are still mostly in the front of the section. So if you never even get to the last couple ones, the wedding cakes, don't worry about those. Just push them off the table. In fact, if you just like shove that bundt cake onto the floor because it's staring at you intimidating, you may have just saved yourself a stomachache. And trust me, the last math question on the SAT will give you some serious indigestion. So that is the rule for that. The ACT is a little different, only in that the hard and medium questions are scattered around. But you still treat it the same way. You still wander around that wedding or that table, picking up the little cakes and eating them. Picking up the little cakes and eating them. What if you come across a big cake? What do? Just sit there and start eating it? Skip it. Let it go. Any question that looks hard on the ACT can be skipped. Now I know, well, how do I know which ones are hard? That's easy. Does it seem hard to you? Then it's hard. You get to decide which ones you want to skip. What's hard for somebody might not be hard for somebody else. Find the questions you can do. Do not spend the time on the ones you can't. Skip it. I'll get back to that a little bit more with the SAT test taking. The essay is going to be a little bit more like the AP essay. In fact, they're changing the ACT's essay a little bit too. And it might be optional. Now, when they say optional, technically you don't have to take it on the ACT, or you don't have to take it, at least they're saying so on the current format of the ACT, or on the new format, I mean. But that only kind of means as far as the UCs say it's required or not. If the UCs say it's required, then it's probably required for you. If it's technically optional, that doesn't really matter if all the schools you want to go to need it. So, yeah, the new essay is going to be technically optional, but you probably are going to end up having to take it anyway. Finally, the math is going to maintain a little less geometry than it's had in previous years, with more data real-world problems, and this is also happening with the ACT. Actually, even this fall's test, the ACT never does these big changes all at once. They just do changes one thing at a time, and the ACT actually has started to roll out less geometry, more sort of data questions, which is good news if you hate geometry, bad news if you hate science and real-world logic and stuff like that. Either way, the math is not changing very much on any of these tests. Some things that aren't changing, at least very much. Emphasis on basic math up through algebra. Somebody was asking me before, like, what level of math do these tests go to? The current format of the SAT really only goes up through Algebra 1 and Geometry, and that's about it. There's not really any even at Algebra 2 on that test. The ACT does a little Algebra 2, like SOHCAHTOA, and the new format of the SAT will do a little bit of Algebra 2, but really not that much. And even if you aren't in those classes yet, don't freak. Those are probably just questions you can skip and focus on the other ones. What else isn't going to change, or is not going to change, is the vocabulary. Now, this is a point of argument. A lot of people say, wait a minute, I thought they're getting rid of all the vocabulary. They already kind of got rid of most of the vocabulary on the SAT in 2005. People freak out about this vocabulary, and we still teach it a little bit in our current classes, but at most, the vocabulary on the current format of the SAT is worth maybe about 9% of your score. So if you stink at vocab, you can still do pretty well. It's really not worth all that much. Yes, they are getting rid of it even more, but they're not totally getting rid of tough words. They're just changing them to ones that they think people should more often know. The word nostalgic, the word meticulous, those will still be words you see on the SAT. A word like esoteric, which ironically is fairly esoteric, is not something you'd see. It probably would be on the current format. They are toning the vocab down a little, but to say that they're totally changing it implies that it was a big deal before, and it really wasn't that big a deal. The other thing that isn't changing is it's still going to be a long, boring, scary test. So a lot of the challenges you guys face now, endurance, dealing with these long, boring reading passages, I wish I could tell you that stuff's going away. It's not, but it's not getting any worse. It's still going to be the same. The SAT is going to give you slightly longer sections, so if you have real trouble paying attention, well, maybe you give yourself an optional personal break in the middle of it and just roll your head around and think about playing Call of Duty for a minute or two, and then go back to dealing with the test. You can still make this a relaxing experience, at least as relaxing as this can be. There are still going to be tricks that can be done on this test as well. And this is one of the big points I also would like to make. Part of the reason the SAT changed, among other reasons, the cynics say it was just because the ACT finally outsold them one year. So they're like, oh, we got to change our recipe, introduce the new Coke. But although some people say, oh, it was too trick-based, we don't want there to be able to be tricks done on the test. Well, unfortunately, bad news for the SAT. Any test that is multiple choice, if a test has math questions and it's multiple choice, there are always tricks that you can do. This is a great example here. This question was one of the hardest ones from actually the College Board's online website, unless they've changed it in the past couple weeks. It should still be up there. This question says, if you can read it, 4x squared over 2x minus 1 is to be written in the equivalent form 1 over 2x minus 1 plus a, then what is a in terms of x? And then they give you all these confusing looking answer choices. What the heck am I supposed to do? Well, like every SAT and ACT question ever, sure, there's a math algebraic way to do it. But sometimes knowing a trick, and these are some of the tricks that we always teach kids to, hey, if you're getting in trouble with the algebra, try it this way, maybe it'll be better. There is a trick that you can do here. It's one of the most famous tricks. It's called make up numbers. What if instead of dealing with all the algebra of this, we just said, I don't like all this algebra. Let me just pretend that x is 2. What if x was 2? Well, couldn't we just throw that in and actually get a value over here? We could. It would be 16 thirds. So you'd have squared 4 times 4 is 16. 2x is, if it's 2, that equals 3. We could also plug it in over to the other side. Now, I don't know what a is yet, so I have to leave that part alone, but the 1 over 2x minus 1 would become 1/3. So what they're saying is we've got 1/3 right here. We got to add something to it in order to get to this. If this is 1/3 and this translates to 5 1/3, what do we have to add to 1/3 to get up to this? 15 thirds, or just 5. So what we're saying is if I just made up x was 2, then a would have to be 5. Did I have to make up x was 2? Could I have said x was 3? Could I have said x was 9,641, my favorite number in the whole world? Why would I do that to myself? I could, though. It would work. It will always work as long as you don't break any rules in the problem. So all I'm saying is if the x was 2, then the answer had better come out to be 5. So all we have to do is figure out which answer equals 5 when x is 2. You guys see any of them that would be 5 if x was 2? A would. And A is the only one. So A is the answer. Now, we didn't have to do the algebra on that, which is good because I didn't know how to do the algebra on that. That can be done on a lot of problems. People say, oh no, you always have to do it like the fancy way. And sure, there is like a proper math way to do it. Here's their solution on the website. You can do it that way if you want to. But I might suggest maybe having a couple backup cheat tricks in your back pocket. It's not really cheating, it's just strategic test taking. So there's a lot of things about this test that you can learn, a few of which we'll cover in a minute when we get to the how do I improve section of this test. So I want to just remind you guys, despite all of their efforts, another thing that is not changing about the new format of the SAT is you can still game the test. There are still tricks. There's all kinds of things you can learn about how to take the test more efficiently and get questions right that you don't know how to do, like this one or the donut problem at the beginning of class. Next up, what test should I take and when? Well, let me just quick lay out some broad picture options. This is in your packet. You can study this more when you get home. Here's the ACT, the fast but simple test. The old ACT is the slow but tricky test, and the new SAT is going to be somewhere in between. Frankly, if you wanted the simplest explanation, here's the SAT, here's the ACT, here's the new SAT. It's more like the ACT, but it's not totally like the ACT. It still has some of the old SAT odor to it. So you'll see some of the same things on that. The essays are going to be optional, apparently, starting in 2016, but again, that doesn't really necessarily mean. Here's a big one. The ACT has always and will continue to have 1/4 of your score be based on math. The current format of the SAT, 1/3 of your score is based on math. The new format of the SAT, and this is a change I don't really I don't really think is a great idea, but it really favors math kids. The new format of the SAT is going to be half math. So as I'll say in a minute, if you love math, you should consider this new format of the SAT, especially if you don't like the verbal parts. If you absolutely hate math, the ACT is a good test for you. The vocabulary never was really a big deal. It is dropping a little bit more off the test. There's going to be no wrong answer penalty from now on, except for if you take the old format of the test. But excuse me, I can't even talk. The old format of the test is still very gameable in learning how to manipulate the wrong answer penalties and how to guess better. And there's a lot that can be learned about that. There's lots and lots of tricks on the ACT. There's even more tricks on the new format of the ACT, and there's even more tricks on the current version of the SAT. There's always going to be tricks. That's what standardized tests are. So if you want, we can certainly help you get through those. Now, what does that mean for you guys? So what should I take? Reasons to take the new SAT in March 16 and beyond would include things like you're taking the PSAT for it. If you love math, like I just said, you might really consider this new format. Not saying you shouldn't also take something else, but why lose a chance to have your strong thing make up half your score? That's a really good reason for this new format. And if you're in a lot of APs, this test is supposed to reflect Common Core a little bit more and be a little more like your AP class. I mean, honestly, if you're in a lot of APs, you're hopefully going to do well in all the versions of the test, but probably the new format of the SAT is the most like your AP classes, so that might be a reason to think about taking it. Now, here are some reasons to take the old SAT. Those of you guys who are seniors or are going to be juniors can still take this test in the spring, and a lot of people are doing that. If you like vocabulary, there's not a huge portion of it, but there is more than the new format will be. If you hate science, if you don't like real-world graph-related problems, there really aren't very many of them on the current format of the SAT, whereas there are a lot of them on the new format and on the ACT. If you are, the other reason, is we've gotten quite good at prepping kids for the old format. Some say that, I'm not going to take this new format, I'm going to take the old format because the test prep companies won't have figured out the new format yet. I mean, this is sort of what we do all the time, so trust us, we'll figure it out. I took a PSAT last night. I know that sounds like the nerdiest thing in the history of the world, especially because it was a Friday night, but I'm going out tonight. No, it's something that we do this. The reason people work in test prep is because they like doing these tests. They like figuring them out. If they threw a new format at us, it's not going to mean that we can't figure out how to teach you to do better on it. We still can, but we also have 10 years plus of experience on the current format, so clearly we're pretty good at it. In fact, so good maybe that they maybe even be changing the test partly because of us. I have kids who go up 300, 400 points on their SAT all the time, and that maybe means they need to improve something with the test format, but it also means that these tests are gameable. We'll game the new one, but we definitely can game the old one, so feel free to use our help if you need it. Now, the third test, the one I haven't talked as much about, but is definitely something you should consider, is the ACT. This is something that you can take kind of whenever. They're not really changing this format, so those of you who are juniors, don't let anybody rush you on this. Anybody who says you have to take the ACT in the fall is probably out of their mind. You can totally take this in the spring. If you're going to be out of the country all spring and you can't, fine, then don't. But you can take this. I usually would suggest taking the ACT in February or April or maybe even June of junior year. That's sort of a good time to do it. There's no change, so you don't have to worry and be pressured by this one. Take it if you hate math. because there's only 1/4 math on the ACT. Take it if you're fast but prefer simple problems. It's by far the most straightforward of the 3 tests. Not that there won't be some tricky questions, but the main thing about the ACT is they're so fast. There's so many questions to do and not all that much time. So if you're really fast, but you like simple problems, the ACT might be your test. If you want to get even with the SAT for all these stupid changes, that would be a third reason. How do you change a test every 10 years? Come on, that's just inhumane. Well, then don't give them their $50. Keep it, give it to the ACT and take that test twice or something. So to recap, guys, relax again, consider your choices, and an opportunity. Here's what I usually recommend. This is kind of the course of action. This is actually in your packet, so I won't go over this too much. But the other part of this, oh shoot, I jumped ahead here. The other reason to take the SAT, this is one of my favorite Simpsons episodes of all time. If you aren't somebody who likes simple problems, you don't like going fast, you're the kid who in class doesn't like to do the math question the way the teacher told you to, you like to do it your own way, and figure it out and still get the right answer. You're like just a good-looking rebel who plays by your own rules. You might benefit from this current format of the SAT. But the kind of bottom line here is that there are reasons to take different tests. There always are. A reason to take all 3 formats. I know this sounds overkill, and I'm not talking you into doing this. You do not have to take all 3 formats. But if you really want to game this system to its absolute maximum, colleges will accept whichever one you do the best on. You know, you might want to double check with your college to make sure it's accepting all these formats, but most will. And if you really want to, the analogy I always use here is imagine you're in the Olympics and the judges give you a choice. You're in the long jump contest and they say, hey, you can either jump just one time and we'll take however long you jump as your entrance, or you can jump 2 times and we'll take your better score. And you have a choice. Why would you not jump twice? And this year, they're like, this year, guys, Special Olympics. We're going to let you jump 3 times. Why not jump 3 times? So I feel like I've got a guitar accompanying along.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Yes?
If you take both SAT formats,
Yes.
how will the company report that to a college? Do they give both of them, or do they just, can you choose, say, this one or that one?
The way it's kind of always been, and it varies from college to college, but if a college really wants to know all of your scores, like they could get them from the test, but generally colleges are sort of under the obligation to accept whatever your highest score was. So even if they're looking at, let's say you send your official SAT results into a school, but then you take it again and do even better, your new results kind of replace the old ones. So their genius statisticians will norm the 2 tests against each other and say, okay, his best attempt is the one he took in March on the new format.
If you took the old exam
Yeah.
versus the new exam.
That's what I'm saying.
They'll decide between the 2 formats.
Exactly, yeah, and just like they can compare a 21 on the ACT to a 1500 on the SAT, they can also compare that to a 1000 on the new format of the SAT, which is going back to 1600, and they'd say, of the 3 tests, where did this kid score the best at? Let's take that score. Some schools still do that super scoring thing where they combine the elements. Other schools will average. You can always ask the schools about this, but remember, just because they're super scoring doesn't necessarily mean that's good news, because everybody gets the super score and the pool gets harder. If they average, that sounds horrible, but then they're averaging everybody, so the pool gets lower. Don't worry about it. Ask the schools that you really want to go to how they consider, but most of them will just take your highest one on whichever format of the test you take. Yeah, very good question. So think about these different formats and which one you want to take. No matter what, you might as well try the ACT, whichever format you decide to take, whether it's both of them or one or the other, because she loves you. I mean, look at her, she's so friendly. So, plan of attack, knowing the content, know your strategies. Now, let's talk about how to raise you guys' scores. I have a couple actual SAT and ACT problems, and I want to show you guys a couple of free tips and on how you guys can do better on these tests, actually digging into the ideas a little bit. So first, of course, reviewing the content never hurts. There's obviously going to be some grammar concepts, some geometry concepts, different types of reading concepts and stuff that you need to know on these tests. But knowing a little bit about how the test likes to do it makes things a lot easier. And I want to start with the first element here, writing. So turn to that packet. You guys all have this one with the 3 bears. If you don't, there's some more out in the hall, so go grab it. We're going to be doing the questions here on the 3rd page, how to raise your score. We're going to start with the English/writing. It's called English on some tests and writing on the other. The first question we're going to deal with says, this legend about Admiral Nelson, like other naval heroes, are based only partially on fact. This is from the current format of the SAT, although the new format of the SAT and the ACT test similar questions, only they do it kind of in the flow of a paragraph rather than an isolated question. All these three formats, though, do the same exact thing when it comes to grammar in English. It's totally unfair for them to test you on every single grammar concept in the English language. There's a billion rules and a billion exceptions, so none of these tests do that. They all pick out the same 8 concepts and just drill them again and again and again and again. So doing the grammar section is kind of like playing against a football team that just runs the same 8 plays over and over and over again. Maybe their double end around safety reverse tricks you the first time, but if it keeps fooling you again and again, you may need to check and see what you're doing. That old quote about fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So if you get to know the usual suspects, the same tricks appear over and over and over again. So brevity, great tiebreaker rule on all 3 formats of the test. If you're ever in a jam, pick the shorter one. That's a good tiebreaker on all of these. All of these tests emphasize brevity. Verbs is currently the favorite thing on the old format of the SAT. Comparison is a big thing that they test on all 3s as well. And these are 3 of the 8 concepts, and we're going to see 3 of them here on this test, although one of them has an exception. So, this legend about Admiral Nelson, like other naval heroes, are based only partially on fact. The first thing we should always do with this is try to circle the part that we think bugs us here. What word here is kind of annoying you guys a little bit? Anybody see the verb? Yeah. R. R? Yeah, R right here is bugging me a little bit. Now, they're doing something they love doing on the SAT and the ACT, which is clouding things up a little bit. If I just ignore this part for a second and read this legend about Admiral Nelson are based only partially on fact, looks a little more obvious that maybe we shouldn't be putting that in there. Now, A is always the same way it was originally written, so we don't want to pick that one. And if I can make a prediction for what I would like to pick, I can make my work a lot faster. What would be better than R? Yeah, it's only one thing, so it's either got to be this one or this one. So right away I eliminate A, B, and D and narrow it down to these other 2. Now, if the exception weren't going to happen here, I would normally say pick the shorter one. The only time you don't pick brevity is when it adds something important or the briefer version ignores the other rules of grammar. And here we have a comparison issue. I'm going to pick on you, sorry. What's your name, man?
Kyle.
Kyle? Let's say Kyle and I each tell you guys a joke. And Kyle's joke crushes it. It's super funny, and my joke is so lame. Would you say that Kyle's joke is funnier than Paul? Than my whole existence? No, sad for me. No, his joke is funnier than my joke. Yeah. Or Kyle is funnier than me. But you can't compare his joke to me or him to my joke. You have to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So if I'm going to compare this legend, even though I like the shortness about C, I have to compare it to other legends, which is where our answer choice of E comes from. Not many of you guys saw that, but really they just do the same 8 things over and over and over again. If you can learn those and see which ones you are getting wrong, unless you got a perfect score on your English, apparently there's a few things you're still getting tricked by. Learn those. It'll make you better. Now math, I'll warn you right now, this is a really hard one. This is from the current format of the SAT as well, and it actually is the hardest one in the section. So if you're like, that math is so hard, I don't want to do that, I want to do the new format. Well, the other one has tricky questions too, and a lot of them are easier than this. But I want to show you guys an example, same trick we used before, of how some of these tricks can make your life a lot easier on these types of problems. This one says a telephone company charges a certain cents per call and additional time at a rate of Y cents per minute. If a certain call costs $5.55 and lasts more than a minute, which of the following expressions represents the length of that call in minutes? And then they give you 5 of the ugliest answer choices you've ever seen in your life. What the heck am I supposed to do? Well, this might be a good one to skip. This looks like a wedding cake right off, so I might just push this off the dining room table. But let's say I do finish all the others and I do have time to get back to it. I still don't know how to do the algebra on this. So let's try that strategy we talked about earlier called make up numbers. What if I just said X is some actual real life number and Y is some other real life number? Now, one really easy way to do it would be to say, what if X was 1 and Y was also 1? Those would be some of the easiest numbers you could possibly pick, and I will tell you that will very easily narrow this right down to 2. There will be 2 that still work, and then you have to break the tie. So I'm actually going to shortcut it even further and show you guys another way to do it involving the same method. Instead of saying X is 1 and Y is 1, let me go a little fancier with this. I'm going to have a really, really long call if every minute costs a penny, so I kind of don't like that. What if I just wanted to get this call over with Grandma as soon as I possibly can? Oh, Grandma, I got this really bad calling plan. It's going to cost me like $5.54 minutes for the first minute. And then I only have $5.55 on my calling card, so I gotta let you go after 2 minutes. I'm sorry, Grandma. Can you tell me about the ladies you don't like in your home again? So if we said that y was 1, this call would be really, really short. How short would it be? How long does this take? You burn off $5.54 talking for 1 minute. Then the rate switches. Your second minute only costs you a penny. How many minutes have you been on the phone before you've burned through $5.55? Just 2 minutes. The first one used up most of your money, and then the second minute used up the rest. Did I have to pick these numbers? I could have picked 500 even, and then 55 for this one, or 1 and 1, and I could just manipulate this as much as I want and pick any numbers that I want. The whole point though, pick any numbers you want and then find what the answer choice is. All you have to do then is go into the answer choices and plug in the same x and the same y, and whichever one comes out to be 2 is your answer. So this one, 555 minus 554 is 1, divided by 1 equals, close. But close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. What about B? 555 plus x, that's like 1,000 something. Minus 1 doesn't even really matter, divided by, is this going to be 2? Do I even need to do the rest of this? As long as I know that it's not the answer, I don't need to continue. 555 minus 554 gives me 1 plus 1 divided by 1 is 2. Now I should check the others just to be safe, but I'm feeling good about this. This one comes out to be 0 if I subtract these two numbers off, which isn't going to work. And 555 divided by 555 is going to be 1 again, which also isn't going to work. I only got one answer choice that works. I have no idea how to do that algebra, but I just got this problem right. There's some really cool tricks you guys can try. This stuff's just the tip of the iceberg. But if you ever get jammed on an SAT or ACT math problem, don't bail. Maybe skip it for now, but come back later and see if maybe it's something you can get. All right, next page. Let's talk about 2 other types of problems. We've done the English. We've done the math. Let's talk about the reading section. I know, so mean. How dare I make you guys do actual reading in here. I'm only going to make you read a little tiny bit, though. This is critical. If there's one section that is the most similar between all the different formats, it's the reading section. The current format does have little passages like this. Sometimes the new format does as well. This one, it really could be on any of the formats. I think I pulled it from the new format of the SAT. In any case, though, it doesn't matter. All reading is the same. The first step, read the darn passage and get the main idea. So let's try that real quick. Guys, everybody take a peek at this. Read it on the board or on the packet if you have it. Feel free to mark it up if you like. Some suggestions are like, circling words that are important, note transition words, and so forth. But let's take a look at this. Daily life is overflowing with mundane mental events. Paperclip gleams amidst a stack of documents. A friend's face shines like a beacon out of a crowd. Smell of freshly baked bread. Childhood memories, thoughts, and perceptions flow by with monotonous ease. So I would say that something like perception is easy. It just seems like it's not that big a deal, if I was to summarize it in my own words, which is a really good tip on these things. In the first paragraph, the author implicitly likens our experience of sensory impressions to, I skipped this whole second paragraph. Even I zone out on these things sometimes, sorry. So it seems anyway. Yet, given what scientists know about how our brains work, even the ability to perceive a paperclip on a messy desk represents an extraordinary, mysterious achievement. So this is actually it seems not that big a deal, but it's actually pretty cool, extraordinary achievement that our brains can do that. Wow, brain, good job, man. I know I don't think it's a big deal that you see a paperclip for me, but I want you to know I appreciate it, even if I don't tell you that enough. So, this passage is basically saying something about perception. Your first step is to get through the passage. If you really have no idea what you read, this is going to be really hard, but you don't need to get every detail. You can always look back for stuff like that. When they ask us about details, then we might look back a little. In the first paragraph, the author implicitly likens our experience of sensory impressions. So, we have to go back to the first paragraph and say, well, what sensory impressions? We've got a couple of them here. It's a friend's face shines. Smell of freshly baked bread evokes childhood memories. Paperclip gleams. What do those all have in common? I don't really know how to make a very articulate prediction here, but they're just not that big a deal. They're kind of everyday stuff that our brain just takes in, and it's like, all right, here you go. Here's the smell, here's the sight. My job is to make as good a prediction as I can, and then go through the answers in what we call a yes, no, maybe style. As in, we say, all right, what works here and what doesn't work, and which ones are we not sure about. And the most valuable thing I can teach you guys about the critical reading section of all 3 tests is that the same wrong answer choices get used all the time. And I won't write those up on the board because they are right there with you. Number 1, their most favorite thing they love throwing at you in wrong answer choices is called never said that. I want you guys to remember those 3 words. If you ever are doing a reading passage and you read an answer, even if it sounds reasonable, like it's something that might be true in real life, but you find yourself saying, well, I guess they technically never said that in the passage, cross the answer off as wrong. I don't care if you read a book about it yesterday and you know it's true in real life. It doesn't matter what you know. This is not a what do you know test. This is a what did they put in this passage test. So you got to be very strict about that. Another is too extreme, when they take an answer and push it too far. We got a really good one of these coming up right off at the top here. The third thing is wrong scope. If they give you something that was mentioned in paragraph 2, it's wrong because they're asking about paragraph 1. So be careful about that. So let's go through these and give these a yes, no, maybe. It's okay if we have to say maybe for now and come back to it. What do you guys think about emotional roller coaster? This is like the worst answer on the whole sheet here. Emotional is a never said that. They didn't say anything about emotions. And roller coaster, even if they had, it would be too extreme. So this one is doubly wrong. All it takes is a single word to make the whole entire thing wrong. But this one, just about every word of it is incorrect. How about an unobstructed stream? What does that even mean? Here's a great place for a maybe. If you read an answer choice and you're like, I don't really know what that says, don't eliminate it just because you don't like it. But then again, we can't really pick it either if we don't know what it is. You should just leave it alone and move on. We're going to skip that one. How about a repeated image? What word makes that wrong? What was repeated? Nothing, except maybe you could say the paperclip, but it's off limits because it's the second paragraph. So you're absolutely right. Repeated is wrong. I'll actually even argue that image is wrong. Well, but there was an image, a paperclip. Oh, friend's face. Yeah, but not the freshly baked bread. Oh, well, it's 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 is 0%. 90% right on the SAT and the ACT equals 0% right. 2/3 right equals all thirds wrong. I want you guys to remember that. The second any of it is wrong, the whole thing's out. A nostalgic reminiscence. What about that one? Okay, that's a maybe. Yeah, it's got fancy words in it. Now that doesn't mean I should pick it or not pick it. It just means it's a little confusing. So let's leave that one as a maybe. I'll leave that one in. And finally, a diverting daydream. Daydream? Where? Like maybe the childhood memories, but that's, again, only one of the 3 things. And diverting is like you're so busy thinking about that paperclip that you crashed your car into a tree. I don't know about that. This word is a bit extreme, and this is a never said that, so this one's wrong too. Excuse me. By the way, there is a kind of a pro-level tip on the SAT and the ACT that, just like with the grammar, if you're ever in doubt, pick the shorter one. Here, if you're ever in doubt, pick the least specific one. An unobstructed stream is pretty vague. Nostalgic reminiscence also kind of too, but usually the reason the more specific one is wrong is because it goes too far in some way. It becomes too extreme or I never said that. Anybody think they have an angle on which one of these is in fact wrong? It's a little too extreme and it's kind of never said that. Let's look at nostalgic reminiscence again. What is a reminiscence? A memory. So like the childhood memory, but not the paperclip gleams, present tense, not the friend's face shines, present tense. Only one of those is a memory. It's already wrong. And even if I was okay with the memories part, nostalgic, like, oh, I remember that paperclip. Oh, we had such good times binding papers together. Oh, that's not nostalgic. Maybe one of these 3 things is kind of a nostalgic reminiscence. I'll give you the freshly baked bread childhood memories thing, but not the other 2. So guys, the only one of these that's not wrong is an unobstructed stream. And I know you hated that answer at first, but the SAT and ACT are about finding out which one's not wrong, just as much as it's about finding which one's right. How else are they going to make it so hard that people get a lot of these wrong? They need the test to settle a nice even bell curve for them, so that's what they'll do. Unobstructed stream, if you look at words like overflowing, perception flow by with monotonous ease, well, I guess there aren't any obstructions. It just sort of flows in. Yeah, and it's like a stream. Dang it, stupid SAT, why are you so good at writing tricky wrong answer choices? Because that's all they do all day long. They will trick you if you let them. You need to know what's wrong with the wrong answers, and it'll make your life a little lot easier. All right, last but not least, guys, before we start to wrap things up, I have one science one for you from the ACT. This section scares the bejesus out of people, but it does not need to. First thing about the science, it's not actually science. It's just a graph reading contest. It's not fair for them to actually ask you to know anything about science because there's so many widely varied science curriculums around the country. So they don't. They ask you stuff that no one knows about and just see how quickly you can adapt to weird new information. But 95% of the time, the answer just comes directly from these passages, these pictures. A lot of times, you don't even need to read the text at all. So let's take a quick look at this. The first thing you should always do is focus on the pictures first, and especially on their axes. Now, you don't have to know what faces are. We'll get this question right without ever learning about that. But I would look at the axes. Notice how we got temperature, how it increases as we go from left to right. Notice how we got pressure increases as we go down, as depth does. Now, you might know that from science or from scuba diving or from going up in tall mountains that sure enough, the deeper you go down under the ground or the ocean, yeah, the pressure does increase, but you don't have to know it because they just told you right here. You don't actually have to know that science. Then there are some things called facies. I don't know what facies are, and frankly, I don't care. I don't want to know what facies are. I just want to get questions right on the ACT. And I don't need to know what facies are to do that. All I need to know is that apparently facies F likes hotter temperatures than does facies C, whatever the heck facies F and facies C are. So when I get to questions, like number 2 there, according to figure 1, which is this one, a facies G rock will most likely form under which of the following pressure and temperature conditions? Well, facies G likes all kinds of different temperatures, but I may use the pressure here to help me a little bit. Facies G likes a lot of pressure. Like how much pressure? Like at least 10. Do we see any answer choices that have more than 10 in the pressure category? We're done. Answer J. Do you know what facies are? Do you care? Nope. Don't let knowing science get in the way of getting a high ACT science score. People sometimes make mistakes and try to like read all of these and learn all the science, and they just end up getting confused and frustrating. You're there to get right answers. You have to learn science, guys. So keep that in mind. Most of the time, unless there are no graphs, the answer will come directly from them. Maybe occasionally you'll need to look at a line or two of the text, but mostly you don't. So guys, those are the 4 content areas on the test and some tricks for each of them. To recap, for English, know the usual suspects that are wrong over and over and over again. Math, sure, review the content, but also know those math magic tricks that will help get you out of trouble. Number 3, the reading section. You got to understand what you're reading, but only the main idea, and then know how they write the wrong answers. They're very feisty about that, but know what they're going to try to trick you with, and you won't get them wrong. And finally, the the science section. Know that it's not really science at all, guys. It's just a graph reading contest. That's not going to change. The ACT is like that. I was just doing another couple of these last night, and like the hardest thing that they'll ever ask you is like, hey, what do you think happens when you heat stuff up? Do you think it expands or do you think it shrinks? And if you've ever like left a basketball in your car overnight and tried to dribble it in the morning, you don't need to have taken, advanced thermodynamics to know the answer to that question. A lot of this is very common sense, and most of the time the answer is just in your graphs. So guys, where do we go from here? Now that you guys know a little bit more about the different formats, when to take them, talk about going forward. No matter what and no matter how, practice makes perfect on these. Guys, even if I never see you again, you guys go off and get a book from the library and teach yourself how to do the SAT and the ACT, practice. Timed practice sections are the key no matter what. If you are somebody who's motivated enough to just learn the test, I've got great news, you can, because it's the same test every single time. If you want some help on that, we have classes and tutoring and can definitely kind of fast track / keep you motivated. Sometimes people find difficult to make themselves go to a library every Saturday morning and take a test. We can help. There's information about that on the last page of our book. There's also some schedules out in the hall I think I forgot to mention, but feel free to pick one of those up if you want. But this is not a sales pitch thing. I want to just teach you guys that these tests are learnable. The more you learn, the better. You guys did a really good thing by being here today, first of all. And I'm going to open the floor up to question and answers at this point, either from you or from the folks watching us live on Periscope. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff? Yes, ma'am.
So, one of the counselors recommended maybe using SuperScore.
Okay.
If you take one old SAT and then a new SAT, can they do SuperScore, or only SuperScores only work with the same kinds of?
That's a great question. Generally, it's only within the same type, because it would be hard to be like, well, I got a 35 on math on ACT. Can I convert that to an SAT score and use it to SuperScore with my high verbal section from SAT? Similar to the ACT? Probably not in most cases. Only a small percentage of schools let you SuperScore in the first place, and even fewer of them let you SuperScore betwixt tests. And either way, don't freak out or get too excited about that anyway, because if every single kid applying to Berkeley could SuperScore all their tests, like the average score to get in would be like a 34 on the ACT or something like that. So I would say probably, in answer to your question, probably not, but there might be schools who will let you do it. Check with your school. Super scoring means like, oh, I took the test in March and I did awesome on the math, but lousy on the verbal. And then I came back and took it in June and I did really good on the verbal. Can I use my highest math from one attempt and my highest verbal from another, combine them into one super score? It's like an all-star team of your SAT, ACT scores.
So you're saying ACT and ACT, you could do that,
Yeah. The most common way to do it is SAT with another SAT.
but we have an SAT and a new SAT.
Right. Some schools will let you do that, not as many though. And some schools will even let you do it with the ACT, but again, not as many. It's kind of a rare thing. Yeah, another question.
Okay, the courses you teach.
Yes.
Do you, let's say he's good in math and he needs more help in English or whatever, different courses that are more specific, or is it?
We, for our normal classes, both online courses as well as the in-person classes, I teach a lot of these classes myself, they're kind of geared at the general student, the average student who could use a little help in everything. If your kid does come in and he's got a 600 in the math and a 400 in the other two areas, a 600 can still be improved, so there's still a lot that he can learn. If you do have a kid who got every single question right on the math and only needs help on the verbal, that might be a candidate better suited for tutoring, because then you can focus only on the stuff he needs and he won't have to waste his time covering stuff he already knows. So generally, if people are like, what should I do, class or tutoring? Class is generally great. If you have a kid who has no time or really wants a one-on-one touch, or only needs help on some of the areas, or is already scoring in the top 15 percentile or the bottom 15 percentile on their test, that might be somebody who benefits better from tutoring because they won't get slowed down or sped up by the pace of the class, which is kind of geared in the middle. Yes?
How far in advance do you take a test prep course before actually taking the test?
Great question. I do recommend around 2 months. If you only need a little touch up and just a few more points of improvement, you can have less time than that. If you need a full overhaul, you need to improve by 400 points, maybe a little bit more time, but on average about 2 months. Most of our classes are 6 or 7 weeks long, so they start about that far in advance of the test. That way you're nice and ready when the test actually rolls around. Others?
How many times can you take a test, or how many times should you take it?
Well, according to the SAT and the ACT, you can take it as many times as you'd like to pay them money.
I heard you shouldn't take it
Right.
more than.
Yes. No, you shouldn't. Generally, schools are generally always fine with you taking the test twice. They get it that people have nerves the first time. So I don't think I've ever heard of anybody having a problem with you taking it twice. If you take a same test more than 3 times or more, some schools do start to wonder, like, what's wrong with this person? Why are they taking the test 19 times and their score didn't go up? You shouldn't really need to take it more than twice, though, because your first and second times shouldn't be your first and second time taking it. They should be your 5th or 6th time because you took a prep course or did tests on your own. So if you do a really good job of prepping, you might only need to do it once, but taking it twice is certainly fine per format. I'm still waiting to hear back from some colleges if they're going to be cool with 2 of the old, 2 of the new, and 2 of the ACT for a total 6. But I don't see any reason why I wouldn't at this point. So I think that's something you could certainly do. I'll let you know if I hear otherwise. Others? Yes, sir.
In your handout, it says take 2 or 3 SAT 2s. What is SAT?
Oh, SAT 2s are more specific hour-long subject tests also given by the College Board that only more selective schools will recommend or require that kids take. Like, let's say you want to go to MIT, like my brother did. They will say, okay, yeah, you got a good score on the SAT math and the ACT math, but how do you do on like higher stuff that actually does include some pre-calc? can you take this hour-long more advanced thing? So if your schools require it, the UCs recommend it, the Ivy Leagues require it, you'll know, your schools will tell you, you need to take those on another test day. They're different than the actual SAT 1. So, yeah, I just mentioned that briefly. I didn't get a chance to cover it too much today, but some awesome to do. Others? Any questions from online, Zach? At least that don't ask terrible, inappropriate things because it's the internet?
Not sure.
Well, they are, and you guys are all welcome to email me or call me. My information is all at pjtestprep.com. Feel free to check in if you have more information. But guys, I want to thank you so much for coming. I hope this helped push you in the right directions. Go forth, be awesome on these tests. And guys, it's been great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.